So let's get to it. 28 years later. So let me forewarn people at two levels. Is this a sequel to the very, very powerful early 2000s 28 Days Later? Only in a very vague sense. So this is not a direct sequel. So if you want the main characters from that entry, they are not going to show up. That is not what this is about. Is this even going to follow up 28 weeks later? I've not seen that film, but apparently not really. They're going in a new direction. Also, this is not a traditional zombie film. There are, and some very powerful action scenes and some really amazing stunts. However, that's again not really the focus of the narrative. So, what is Danny Boyle and Alex up to? And those were the original creators of the first film. Well, we still have the fast zombies, but they've evolved. But basically, the central narrative is this kid called Spike and his father. And at this point, the zombies have become so normalized with this kind of weird new British culture. I emphasize British because Europe apparently has solved the zombie issue. That's not a spoiler. That's at the very beginning of the film. They just say Europe has handled, however you want to call it, the infection issue. And that matters because several key characters show up, and you're like, oh, right, that's because they're not from Britain. But for whatever reason, this weird, isolated community has normalized the zombies. They're still threatening, but they treat them differently. So Spike and his father go on this weird coming of age ritualized process where he becomes a hunter. And, well, as you could expect, something goes wrong. And that is probably the most frightening scene. Now, I was not really too scared with this film, except this one key scene towards the middle of the film. So it is scary in places, but if you're a hardcore horror fan, you're probably going to be like, this wasn't that scary. Was it good with the action? Right, we've got a very mobile iPhone camera. Yes, but again, that is really not the point. I'd say this film is mainly here to incite dread, especially the ending. It's meant to be a very kind of, I guess, gothic, really, and very murky and very dark film, as you'd expect. But it is, in places, very funny, if in a very weird way, and never boring. This is not a boring film, but it is going to be paced in a manner I think some film fans are going to find frustrating. So if you did love 28 Days, which I do too, even though I'm much more of a George Romero guy, I still prefer the Romero films with zombies. Yeah, I guess the best way to put it is that is more like a fairy tale, right? At the end of the day, it's kind of a very weird action fantasy fairy tale film. This is not. This is a much more meditative, philosophical, intellectual kind of film, and it's touching on a lot: war, genocide, childhood, celebrity culture. It's just touching a lot of things. So it's probably more closer to a David Fincher film or David Cronenberg, frankly. Now, those films are fine, but they're not satisfied with just doing straight up horror, right? Cronenberg films rarely are satisfied. Oh, we're just going to have chills and thrills. No, he always wants to do a lot more. This film wants to do a lot more. I'm making it sound a lot more boring than it is when you say intellectual, philosophical. No, this is a very well made film. It is, for me, well paced, but it is slow. It is slow, and I think what it's trying to say, you need to think about it a little bit. I'm not British, but I think the ending is going to puzzle non British people. They're like, huh? And a lot of people thought the whole film was ruined by the ending. I kind of understood what they were going. I did a little bit more research, like, oh, right, okay, I can kind of see what they're doing. I take for granted what happens at the end is hooked up to the beginning, and the beginning is also very weird and puzzling. You're like, what does that have to do with anything? It just would look weird. So this is a very strange film by many, many standards. However, was it good? Yes, it's good. So if you're okay with a horror film going in a very strange direction, this will be for you. However, if you wanted a very conventional zombie film where humans kill zombies, zombies bad, humans good, this is not for you. And I do think this is an excellent film. I'm going to give it an 8.5. There are a few issues with the camera. I'm fine with Danny experimenting if he doesn't want to use traditional film. That is fine. It does look good. For the most part, there are some shots that look amazing, but in places, the iPhone, it's a trade off. Yes, you get a lot of mobility, They can do some few tricks that you can't do with a normal camera, but it did look a little cheap, especially at the beginning. But again, that was intentional. It's meant to be a very dreary looking film, meant to look very, very murky. However, is this going to be one of those great zombie films people are going to talk about later? I don't think so. It's going to be a great film that's going to polarize people, but if you take something like Shaun of the Dead, which is universally praised as a really funny and also very strong zombie film, it's not that. It's not that. Edgar was trying to do a very genre film with an artistic touch. This is basically an artistic film, kind of being forced to use the zombie trope. That said, they're not disrespecting or decanonizing or even contradicting what they did with the first film, but this is a very different tone, very different style, not trying to be the first film or imitate it or just do a copy. That's not what they're interested in. I'm fine with that if Danny and Alex want to move on and do something that's a little bit more experimental. But I think a lot of fans do want just Danny Boyle Part 2, and you're not going to get that. This is probably akin to George Lucas in the Star Wars, right? Where he did the original trilogy one way, and again, being an artist, he's like, okay, fine, we did that, but I want to do the prequels another way. And that really alienated a lot of people, including me, but I've come to appreciate, even praise the prequels on many levels. But the prequels also do have insane amount of flaws. So they're kind of both. But again, it's a very artistic decision, and I respect George Lucas as an artist. I wish he gave credit to Tolkien and frankly Frank Herbert a lot more, but that's me. And that said, I don't think this is going to be a big backlash like the prequels, but clearly some film fans are like, I wanted a traditional zombie film. I'm not getting it. I'm getting really angry right now. And I agree. If you come into 28 years later wanting normal, bad zombie, good human, you're not going to like this. Beyond the first third, you're going to be like, oh, that's a nice zombie film. And then it becomes like, what is this? It is more interested in being a war film, a film about children, children dealing with adults. Again, it's just dealing with a lot of deeper issues. And again, I'm not British. I guess how Danny feels that young people are being, frankly, propagandized into becoming warriors and soldiers. And this is clearly a very anti war film. It's not blatant, right? It's never going to tell you, oh, Iraq war bad, Trump bad. It doesn't do that. But I do think towards the end, you're going to get the message whether you like it or not. I don't disagree with the message. I was opposed to the Iraq war. I don't like what they're doing with Trump today. However, if you are very politically conservative, you may think that this is unnecessarily trying to poke the bear. I just want to be fair to both sides. However, I didn't really have an issue with the politics, and believe me, I can be very critical of Danny Boyle. I didn't like his Steve Jobs film. I do sometimes think he preaches too much and that suffers, right? His stories suffer from preaching too much. So I'm very mixed on Danny. Even when I like the film like Slumdog Millionaire, you're kind of like, okay, I get it, but this needs to be a little bit more creative. This goes to the other extreme. This is a very, very creative film, but it may be a little too creative for some people, and the ending will definitely be polarizing. I think very few people are going to be like, "Oh, that was a really great ending." A lot of people are going to be like, "What the hell was that about? Wait, doesn't that completely destroy the beginning of the film or the middle section?" Maybe, maybe not. I take it for what it is. It's a very risky artistic choice. So I will probably end by saying this is a lot better than Sinners, which is a nice film, but it's to be okay. It's a nice genre film with artistic touches. This is the complete opposite. This is one of the best films of the year, but it is mainly an artistic film, mainly an auteur film. If you wanted a really great horror film, I think a lot of people are going to be like, I need more horror to make this a great horror film. I disagree. I think it's a legit horror film, but it's more in the style of being a gothic film, more like The Wicker Man. It's more about folk, cult panic. It's more about that. So, which are topics I'm interested in. So, I'll be doing a lot of essays on this one. But again, if you wanted a straightforward horror film, this is not for you.